Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, it's been a hot minute since I've done one of these types of videos, and I'm just going to turn the audio down because my Spectres are going crazy. Anyway, so you guys would have seen on stream I've been playing a Spectre build of late. I got to the end of the league and I was like, I had some currency floated to me, so thanks a lot for that, about 20 div. And I had an Ashes drop, and I was like, alright, cool, let's make a Spectre build. I just wanted to walk through the end game and basically tick off challenges, and I wanted a build that could do everything. So, one thing that I'll say, the misconception is that minion builds are weak post-change. They are actually really still good. The problem is there's too many people out there saying that they're bad. They're not that bad. They still do everything in the game, and i.e. this one has done everything in the game and can even delve to like 250 to 300 without any real issues. That being said, and I did get close to absolutely eviscerating Uber Shaper with it, but I just need to work on the survivability a bit more, and it's not fully upgraded. There's so many other things to add into the build to make it even more powerful that it's pretty open-ended. So, you know, there's that. So how does this work? What does it do? So basically it runs on Spectres, which are these bad boys here running around. In particular, it uses a Spectre called Forged Frostbearer, which for this league was one of the Crucible mechanic Spectres. Where can you get these? Basically anywhere that there's a Crucible bloody Forge thingo, you can hit it and there's a chance that one of these bad boys will pop up. Usually in the higher levels, like I was able to get them by like Act 8 without having to go and get someone to Spectre Bank for me and all the rest of the shit. And we're not going to talk about Spectre Banks or anything like that. That's another whole different thing if you play minions or have played minions in the past. So I just want a build that would work really well. That'd be a lot of fun. That'd have a shitload of projectiles thrown at enemies and would just kill things. So a couple of questions that you might want to ask. How tanky are the Spectres? My Spectres don't die. I've been hit by everything. Like, I've even fought Uber Shaper. I've died, but my Spectres don't die. My AG doesn't die, and my Carrion Golem doesn't die. And one of the reasons for this is my Raid Spectre is level 28. And I get this from various different sources, and we'll talk through it in more detail in gearing. Two of the most expensive pieces of gear in this build, and I'll preface this as a 60 div build. A lot of the currency is actually just wrapped up into the Spectre chest, the +1 Spectre chest, and the boots that I managed to get, which is +2 to level of Raid Spectres. Now, if you cannot get these items, don't freak out. Literally just run anything that has like shitloads of ES or whatever and run around 4 Spectres. It'll do a little less damage, and I've done the damage calcs here. So, basically, if you don't have +2 to Spectres, so we could drop the Spectres down by 2, your DPS is going to go down by a little bit, right? You can see that here. It goes down by a little bit. But the calc at this point is it's like 8.215 before AG buff and before carrying, like, before the rest of the buffs. It's like 8.25 mil DPS on Spectres with 5 Spectres. And then it's 6.527 million DPS. Now, there's a shitload of buffing that comes from the AG, and we'll talk about how the AG is built later in the video, because we run, like, I think it's Dying Breath, Leocast, a couple of other things to get that cracking, and Garba the Ephemeral. You could make this build way stronger if you could get a Kingmaker on it, then you'd have Cull, and you'd have Fortify on your minions, which would make them even more godly. So if you did invest like 8 to 10 div on a Kingmaker, which is an axe, for your AG, you could on this build and it would actually survive. At least in all the tests I've done, my AG doesn't die, so arguably if you do this tree exactly the same way, yours won't die. That being said, I have always been very skeptical about like people who quote minion builds being in the hundreds of millions of DPS. Like, unless you put like mirrors in, then you would have to like severely fabricate numbers outside of PoB and distort things to get to that point. Anyway, there's probably going to be someone that's going to disagree with me on that point, but it doesn't pass the pub test, and I don't really care for the comment. This build is like probably at best, I would say if you inflate it based on the 50% damage, whatever, probably up to like 10 to 15 million DPS, like, and the other side of it is it's hitting consecutively, and there's other things like Ice Storm going on, which does more damage, and so on and so on. So this is probably a low point DPS, but it's definitely not like I don't know, unless you like plug absolutely insanity level gear into your build, then this is I feel like a pretty good metric to work on. And there are other areas to upgrade, like greater multiple projectiles and or awaken greater multiple projectiles and awaken spell echo that could buff this up. Level 20, higher level gems that could buff this up as well. There's a lot of different directions you could go to make this build better. +1 amulets, better reservation. You could have the Spectre roll on the enchant on the helm. So there's a lot of things you could do. You could get a better Darkness and Throne. There's a lot of things you could do to make this build better. But as it stands, this is like if you've been playing for the league and you're looking for like a last build and you got like 40 to 60 divs sitting in the bank, or even if you had like 20 to 30 div, if you didn't want to get the chest or the boots yet, then you could play this build and then just farm up and then basically get it, because that's all I've done at this stage, just farm currency and then kept improving the build as I went. So yeah, that's basically it. So anyway, let's, like in all good fashion build guides that I do, let's get into a bit of a bullshit check and have a look at the POB and find where all of the damage stats and all the details of the build comes from, so you can understand how this works. Okay, so this is our POB. So we're quoting about 328,000 DPS per projectile, which is on the ice border, and there's 5 ice borders that hit every time they throw. The effective hit pool is 236,000. So this is actually like a very Jorgen style Spectre build in that it's pretty friggin' tanky. That being said, we're not overcapped here. A lot of the tankiness is coming from the fact that the block chance is at 58%. And the spell block chance is at 75%, and that's before we account for the offering that pops up as well. I think it's Spirit Offering in this case. But anyway, this is the calc screen that we've got. So, obvious one, kill all bandits. First question that everybody asked me, I always kill all bandits. I never leave bandits alive. Now, we can tick this on or off, and this doesn't heavily distort it. So let's leave it off because someone's going to ping me on that. So basically, we don't need to tick anything else here. We have Soul Lunaris, Soul of Aberith, that deals with burning ground pretty easily. Nothing else is ticked here, because as far as I'm concerned, they don't generate any of these charges. Do I have Onslaught? Yes, I have Onslaught. The reason why is I am running a Silver Flask, which gives me Onslaught. So I have Onslaught. Now, do my minions have Onslaught? Well, they do, because that comes from up here on Ravenous Horde, which gives my minions Onslaught every 30 seconds, Onslaught for 4 seconds on kill. So my minions, as long as they've killed, have Onslaught. If they don't have Onslaught, it's not a huge damage drop. Like, it technically could be, but it's not. Flasks are active. Summon minions is like in the vicinity of, well, it's 7, so it's AG, Carrying Golem, and 5 Spectres. And if it's 6, there's no real impact to that anyway. It doesn't really affect me. Consecrated Ground. Yes, we have Consecrated Ground because I'm running a Bottle of Faith. So, of course, we have Consecrated Ground up. And then no Burning Ground. Nearby enemies. I always have it on 10 because I usually delve and, like, maps you have a lot of enemies. This build's really made for, like... Well, it's really made for, like, doing everything. But generally, you're surrounded by enemies. But it does pretty well on bosses, too. Like, as you can see in the B-roll, it pretty much clears everything with the exception of Ubers. We're not going to talk about Ubers. Ubers is skill-based. Ubers is not just throw the build at it and it'll just magically kill it sort of based, unless you've got a build that's made to one-shot Ubers. Have you been hit recently? Well, it's a max block character with an Aegis Aurora, so generally I'm getting hit. And Corpse is consumed recently. Like, this is inconsequential. It literally means nothing to the damage stat. Feeding Frenzy. Yes, we have Feeding Frenzy in the minion build to make them aggressive as well, and we'll talk about that in gem setups. So we have 7 minions here. Enable buffs, so yep, my Spectres have buffs, and that would be like Soul Eater and whatever else, because I've got the gem that gives us Soul Eater as well. And then beyond that, so none of these mods really matter. Is the enemy cursed? Yes, we have Mark. We have Sniper Mark that we apply to everything that I have here, so basically I tap that and then that does huge amounts of damage to everything in the vicinity. So yes, enemies are marked, generally bosses in particular. Enemies are chilled. Well, we do cold damage to the chilled, that's given. Is the enemy exposed to cold? Yes, they will be, and that comes from our Awaken Cold Penetration at level 5, which gives us 10% chance to inflict cold exposure on hit. So that is an absolute yes. And is the enemy on Consecrated Ground? Yes, because we have Bottled Faith. And or beyond that, Guardian and Pinnacle boss damage is ticked on. So this isn't distorted. Uber, obviously it goes down. Standard bosses, it's about the same. Doesn't really change too much. Anyway, let's get into the gearing. Okay, so just ignoring my specters, which constantly keep throwing out Ice Storm all over the shit. Let's talk about gearing. So, helm. I don't have the enchant on the helm yet. I'm going to have to Uber Lab because this helm is really good. Now, this helm was a little more expensive. We did have, because it's got so much, got the +2 to minion auras. It was like a minimum of 3 div. I think I paid like 5 or 6 div for it. It pretty much ticks every box. If you can get anything that's close to this to deal with your resistances, it's not an ES-based helm. We're not worried so much about that. We mainly want the level 2 to all minion skills, which gives us another 2 levels to our Spectres and our AG and everything else. And then any other stats you can get are only going to advantage it. I've obviously got a +1 roll on this, but it really doesn't mean anything to this build. And realistically, I could change that out and put a more defensive roll on it now looking at it in revision. I'm using an Aegis Aurora. Enough said, it's great for max block. It's going to give me 2% of armor when blocked. I've got like 30 to 40,000 armor on, or 30,000 armor on this build, so I have a good chunk of armor 24/7. It's just the best in slot shield for this type of build, especially a Chaos Inoculation build. For anyone who knows what Chaos Inoculation is, it means we take the CI node, we're immune to Chaos, but we have 1 HP, and then we just stack a shitload of ES on top, and that's how we live. Which means we don't need a Shabronze. I do use an All's Uprising in good fashion. I have an item from Delve, sue me. I just like All's Uprisings. I think they're really build enabling, which allows us to have Zealotry has no reservation, so we get a free Zealotry, and hits against nearby enemies have 50% increased crit chance. And one thing this build does is it tries to max out crit on our minions so that the Spectres have the highest probability of doing huge amounts of crit and damage. Our wand. So I lucked out with this one on the market. I think I paid like 6 div for this, but you don't need this one necessarily, just something close to it. The 2 most important rolls on this, however, are the +1 level of all spell skills and +1 level of all minion skills. And this gives us +2 to our Spectres, which gets us closer to that 28 mark, which is really good. So would recommend. And then the enchant, the Crucible I've got on here is just like any minion modifiers. They're going to be an advantage. Outside of that, like I haven't got anything else really special on this. So I could get 3% more. Oh no, I can't get 3% more damage on that. Yeah, there we go. Alright, so chest. Alright, this is a biggie. So I paid a lot for this thing. I think I paid like maybe 8 to 10 div for this chest. If you can't get this chest, it's fine. Anything that gives you huge amounts of ES and defense to compensate for less damage is perfectly adequate. And dealing with resistances and auras mainly. So I do have really good implicit rolls on this as well. But if you can get anything close to this, do it. If you can get a Spectre chest, better. If it doesn't have ES, don't stress. You just run lower ES. You're already pretty tanky. You will get one hit. This build isn't as tanky as my other builds that I play, but it still is fairly tanky. But I get +1 extra Spectre, which gives me a pretty good damage buff, so there is that. Outside of that, I've got Bone Rings. Now, these Bone Rings, one is focused on attributes, being Strength and Dex, to push those up as far as possible. The other one is focused on minion damage and minion resistance, so I got 28% increase all elemental resistances. Plus another 15%, plus minions deal 29% increased damage and movement speed to 20%. Now, with the changes that came in for minions a couple leagues ago or 3 leagues ago, it's really important to focus on trying to balance out your minions' stat attributes like elemental resist. One of the reasons why AGs tend to die is because you don't have chaos resist on any of the gear that you put on the AG. So, and when I talk about that, I'll run you through what I did there. But basically, you want to have something that gives it like chaos resistance, and you want to have some way of dealing with chaos resistance in this build itself. And this is throughout the tree, and we'll talk to that as we sort of work through this. Now, Darkness Enthroned is always going to be one of the best in socket items for the belt, unless you got a Mage Blood. But Mage Bloods on minion builds aren't really that great unless you're buffing your stats up, but you want to focus on buffing minion stats on minion builds. So that makes them a little different to every other type of build out there. So that being said, I've got Ghastly Eyes that deal with attributes, ES, Chaos Resist on my minions, and cold damage. And basically exactly the same on the other one. And also extra life for the minions. The more life you stack on the minions, the less chance they have to die because their regeneration scalably goes up with other attributes in your tree. and then resistances that you have on them as well. And basically they turn into what I have here, which is fundamentally unkillable minions, which is really good. I think my AG tracks at how much? 70,000 life. So he's pretty tanky. And he can take some hits. So yeah. Anyway, gloves wise, implicit with minion damage, cold exposure on hit though, you already do that with Awaken Cold Penetration. Pretty much focused on dexterity here because this build does get a bit dry on dex, and then resistances and as much ES as I could possibly shove on this item. And boots is +2 to raise all specters. So this starts to get really expensive because these particular boots are not cheap. That don't even exist on the market anymore. Yeah, they're very hard to find. So if you were going to farm these yourself, and this is what I would say, and there's no probability that you will get this drop, but I've had one pair drop this league for me. They drop from minion nodes, minion and aura nodes in Delve. So if you focus on minion nodes in Delve, it's a Delve specific role. The same with Spectre chests, and that's if you're farming Delve. For people who follow this channel, if you have Spectre chests drop, and if you have +2 to Spectre boots drop, then keep them because you will be able to sell them. In particular, if there's a really good Spectre that's out in the league, like, you know, the Frostbearers in this league, then there's a good chance that you'll be able to liquidate them pretty quickly and for a really good price. So I've got these +2 boots. If you can't find them on the market, don't freak out. What I would do is switch out your Awaken minion damage for a Empower. That's going to drop your overall damage, but it's also going to buff up your minions by an increment of level 3 levels, which is going to compensate for your boots. And then basically just focus on trying to farm some Delve and stuff like that. And then see how you go getting them with minion nodes. Eventually they will drop. Generally they will drop at some point if you play enough Delve. Like anything, things tend to drop over time. Anyway, Flask, Bottled Faith, Rumi's Concoction. I just got a basic Quicksilver Flask, Onslaught Flask, and Basalt Flask with Corrupted Blood immunity as well. So that I don't have to worry about running Corrupted Blood on this build. I could put it in this build, but I haven't really needed it. I haven't really died very much to Corrupted Blood at all. Anyway, that's it for gearing. Pretty straightforward. Oh, and my Anoint is obviously Charisma. So we're running 3 big Chungus Auras and another 2, 35% and 25% Aura. So we've got some big auras running in this build, and that's how I've balanced that out. Anyway, let's get into the gem setups. Okay, gem setups. So, Helm, Sniper's Mark, given, just put it to your left click, and bam, you tap that on enemies when they get near you, and your minions do huge amounts of damage to them. Outside of that, I've got on a level 6 cast when damage taken setup, Bone Offering and Molten Shell, and I've got these at like level 13 or level 11 each so that they cast without having any implication. Now the reason why I've got Bone Offering, when that triggers, it gives minions 32% chance to block spell and attack damage, but because of our ascendancy on the Necromancer, we have Mistress of Sacrifice. So we get 50% less effect of that, but that actually affects me, and also when there's corpses on the ground, and so I get max block out of that as well, which just makes Necromancers really strong in that aspect. And if you didn't know about that mechanic, that's a really good mechanic to use, especially if you use a cast when triggered 1, cast spell when triggered 1, and then basically, you know, you can have pretty much automatic max block on Necromancers, and that's how you deal with their damage reduction and defense layering if you play different types of Necro builds, but that's a video for another day. Outside of that, we've got in the chest Greater Multiple Projectiles, Raise Spectre. Obviously, you want a level 21 gem. Doesn't really matter if you get like Anomalous or whatever, Raise Spectre, just Raise Spectre's fine. Pardon me. Level 5 Awaken Cold damage, a cold penetration. I've got Awaken minion damage as well. Even though this does drop my minions' health, my minions are so strong they're at a point where I can run that. I didn't switch that out for quite some time, and for a long time I ran a level 4 or level 3 in power. And eventually when your minions become strong enough, then you can switch that out and put it in there. You don't need to worry about them dying. I run Anomalous Feeding Frenzy, which gives them more like Life Leech, but you don't need to run Anomalous. You can just run normal Feeding Frenzy, but I've got a 20-20 on that. If you can get a 21-20, fine. Doesn't do a huge difference of impact, but it makes your minions really aggressive, which is really good. And then Awaken Spell Echo, because these are caster minions, so Spell Echo increases their attack speed, which is why they flog shit so hard. Now in the wand, I've got Convocation, Desecrate, and Frostblink. You can switch out Frostblink for Flame Dash. I just like Frostblink. I think it's just more fun. Now, I do have Convocation mapped to my move buttons, so my Spectres are always on top of me, and they tend to auto-lock extremely quickly, so I'm never worried about them having to deal with, like, retargeting and cast time, as you would have seen in the B-roll. They're pretty snappy, so mainly because they have Feeding Frenzy on them, so they're highly aggressive and they hit really quick. So yeah, this is just a really good way to keep them up with you, and honestly works really good on minion builds. Now I do have access to Bone Armor. I don't use Bone Armor. Other people might disagree with that. I just think it's a wasted skill because I can't put it on cast from damage taken, so I can't be effed with it basically. And Desecrate I use, so if I'm in a boss fight and I get hit, then it will trigger my Bone Offering, and then my block goes up and my minions block goes up, so that's a really good factor of that too. And that's why another reason why you want to have cast when triggered on your wand, but I don't have that, so this is how I got around that cheaply. So my gloves, I've got Tempest Shield, Discipline, I've got Determination and Enlighten. And that so I can just manage all those auras because they're all big chungus auras. And then in my boots I've got Summon Carrion Golem, Meat Shield, Minion Life Support, and Divergent Animate Guardian. Now, one of the reasons why my Animate Guardian doesn't die is because I have Divergent Animate Guardian, which gives my Animate Guardian at max level 132% increased minion maximum life with 20% on it, because the percentage goes into minion life moving forwards. And that's one of the reasons why AGs tend to die, is you're not running that, or you haven't put chaos resistance on it. And that's basically how I've got mine set up. So the last item where I've got gem setups is in my Aegis Aurora, and I've got Zealotry, Hatred, and Generosity. Now arguably I could switch that for up here and get +1. I probably should do that, but at this stage I'm not really losing sleep about it, but I probably could do that and get more DPS, so I might actually do that. But anyway, that's it for gearing. Okay, so while we're on the topic of gearing, let's have a look at what I run on my AG. So let's just bring in the screen so we can have a look. Alright, so basically, your boots and your gloves focus on anything with chaos resist and life regeneration and max life. That's basically it. Any rare item is fine. You can get, I think there were unique boots that you can get for those guys, but really, yeah, they're not very good anymore. So yeah, anything that gives you defenses, get that. Chaos resistance on boots, chaos resistance on gloves, hunky dory. That leaves three sockets left because you socket 5 items on them. So Learcast, what is a Learcast? So basically this is Learcast right here on screen. And it's a really like cheap 1 to 5C helm that you can pick up. Gives your AG a shitload of life. Doesn't give it much damage, but it gives you and nearby allies 50% increased damage. So that's going to give your Spectres an increase to their DPS at the end of the day, which is a really good, makes it a really good item for buffing up your minions and increasing your Spectres damage. Now beyond that, the other item that you'll also want to have is the Dying Breath Iron Staff, and this one again is really cheap. So it gives you 18% increased effective aura skills, 18% increased effective hex skills. It's like Sniper's Mark. Nearby enemies have 18% increased effective curses on them, so i.e. Sniper's Mark is a curse / mark / hex. Nearby enemies gain 18% increased damage, which isn't great, so if you are running this, it is causing you more damage. Sorry, got that around the wrong way. Nearby allies gain 18% increased damage, so that means your Spectres get 18% increased damage and 18% increased effective non-curse auras from your skills. So that would be like Zealotry and anything else that you've got on the build, they're going to get buffed up like that. Pretty much best in socket outside of the Kingmaker, which we'll talk about last. And the armor that you want to put on your Spectre, sorry, your Animate Guardian, I got Spectres in the brain, Garba the Ephemeral. And the reason why this one's so good, you ignore all these other stats, don't really mean diddly squat, and you don't need to meet the 600 strength and intelligence requirements because AGs don't have attribute requirements. However, nearby enemies cannot deal critical strikes, so basically it creates crit strike immunity, and nearby allies' action speed cannot be modified to below base value, meaning your Spectres can't be slowed down, and also you can't be slowed down. So that means like temporal chains and stuff like that doesn't work on your build, because your AG just stops all of that. Literally, it's like having your own personal aura bot at the end of the day, and it's one of the reasons why minion builds are really good. And if you could fit a similar type of AG into any other build, it would actually be really good, which is why I really wanted to play with link builds at some point. But anyway, this is how that basically works. So yeah, that gets that working. Now, if you could afford an 8 to 9 div item for your AG, and like in my case, I know my AG is strong enough to be able to do it, we could actually ditch this and we could play something a little stronger, being the Kingmaker. So this got pretty heavily buffed up a couple leagues ago when they did that like big shuffle up of items. And basically what it means is nearby enemies have 30% increased item rarity. So that means anything that they kill, they get a 30% increased rarity. Nearby enemies have Culling Strike, which is pretty damn strong. Nearby allies have 50% increased crit multiplier, and nearby allies have 10 fortification. So you have like a half fortification, which basically makes you, if we had this on this build, for example, and we had fortified, then we would get like 528,000 effective hit pool. So it's actually a really good investment on this build, like a super good investment that would make me extremely strong. And it would buff up all your minions, including the AG itself. So yeah, that's basically what we run on the Spectre. So I'm actually now thinking I am going to, and as you can see, he's just chatting around with that gear. I might actually think about investing in a Kingmaker next, because that'll make this build really pop off. But anyway, let's get into the pathing tree and talk about that. Okay, so this is the thing that we all want to talk about and how it works. So my tree is actually extremely simplified compared to, I don't know why that glitch happens, really funky glitch, but anyway, whatever. So basically we start at the energy shield mana node for the Necromancer or the Witch, however you want to call it. We come up, we grab Arcane Focus. We don't need to worry so much about mana, because we come up to Mystic Bulwark, because we stack so much block. We don't need to worry too much about mana, because we then scale our mana based on our spell block chance, which gets up to like 75%. So we get 75% increased mana regeneration. So mana's not even an issue, not that we use a huge sum of it anyway. Next we have Unending Hunger. So this is for our Spectre minions in particular. So when 40 intelligence is in the radius, Spectres have a 50% chance to gain Soul Eater for 20 seconds on kill, which means they just go crazy, which is why they're so fast. Then basically I moved over this side, picked up Ravenous Horde, which gives minions movement speed and onslaught, also a bunch of attack speed, which is really good on this build. Then I come up and I grab a minion wheel here. Now, you don't need to really muck around with too much on the minion wheel. I actually just alch this one. This is like really easy to craft. Energy shield, minion damage is a given, you get that straight away, you don't need to roll for that. And strength and dexterity, and you just stack that and then take the whole wheel. So this is a 12 socket wheel, or a 12 passive wheel. You don't need to focus on getting any other stats or attributes on them, just literally minion damage. And then I have second skin as well, which pushes up my armor, pushes up my spell block and my attack block, which is really useful. And then I've also got a Cobalt Jewel, which gives me attributes, energy shield, minion damage, and some damage recoupment. Then I come across, grab Chaos Inoculation and Influence. So you don't want to start running Chaos Inoculation until you have your Aegis Aurora, which is like by Act 9 generally. So stay away from CI until Act 9, pretty much, because Aegis Aurora is usable at level 62. So yeah, there is that. It says level 62, somewhere, anyway. Alright, so then you come back across, you'll grab Unnatural Calm. We want to grab Death Attunement. This gives us 1 extra Spectre, because we need that. And then we want the Minion Offense Mastery, so they have Unholy Might for 4 seconds on kill, which really doesn't do very much. Maybe I need to take that out, but anyway. I also grabbed the 2% of Energy Shield per second regeneration. We come down, I grab Arcane Guarding and all the nodes around this, as well as the block chance per 5 block on shield. This gets the attack block up. Then we come down and grab Insightfulness, down to Safeguard, and then we go for Spell Block and Elemental Resistance. This helps get our resist up. Then we go Spiritual Command, and we also go Sacrifice. This makes your Spectres and your AG extremely strong. You get 1% minions get 1% life regeneration, 20% max life, and then basically we get Convocation has 40% increased cooldown recovery, because we want that to keep cycling as we're running around and chasing us around. The other thing is Minion Defense Mastery. We want 8%, penetrate 8% of cursed enemies' elemental resistances, and that's going to do a lot more damage to enemies as well. And then basically, maybe should get that too. Anyway, so you'll come down here, grab Fearsome Force. This node focuses on minion critical strike, multi, and crit. And we also want to get minions have 30% increased AoE, because they do a damaging skill that has an AoE effect, which is why this build is really good at clearing maps. Then we get Zealot's Oath. Once you get Chaos Inoculation, don't take this before CI. If you take it before CI, you're probably going to die a shitload of times. Then we come down, we get Sovereignty. We get our auras from your skills have 10% increased effect on you. This is going to buff up things like Discipline. And then Righteous Army and Redemption. This is all going to give you damage and a lot more survivability for your minions. And then at that point, you're pretty much done. So Ascendancy-wise, usually I take Commander of Darkness on the first Ascendancy, Mindless Aggression on the second Ascendancy point, Bone Barrier on the third, and then finally Mistress of Sacrifice on the fourth. And that's basically it for the tree and the Ascendancies. Okay, so that's pretty much it for the build. It just works. Like, it is one of those builds that just work. Do I think minions are good? Yeah, I don't think minions are a bad build at all. I think people got overreacted and tried to overcorrect when they changed the way that minions work, but there are a lot of minion skills that don't work so well, but definitely not Spectres. If there's a good Spectre minion, it's actually pretty good. And actually even Golemancers, like carrying Golemancers, are still a thing. Especially for Blight, AFK Blight farming, so that is still very much a thing. Yeah, anyway, Absolution's really good, Summon Reaper is really good as well, Bleed Reaper, you know, there's this Poison SRS, still really good, even Skelly Mage is still really good, like, Necromancers and PoE are still very strong, it's just, like, not the flavour of the month right now. But anyway, if you're looking for a build that you just want to play before the end of the league, that's really cool. This is it. I don't know if the Frostbearers are going to be in the next league, so play it while you can because they're really strong. But yeah, anyway, if you like this video, don't forget to like and sub to the channel, and also follow the Twitch because I stream on there a lot more these days than I do on YouTube because YouTube doesn't like music. Anyway, until next time, don't forget to like and sub, and stay filthy as always. And I'll be doing a lot of videos coming up to ExileCon, and I'll be going to ExileCon this year, so keep an eye out for those coming out anyway. Alright, anyway, have a good one, and bye.